Mom screamed. You're ungrateful! Get out of my house! Over a simple mistake, I just grabbed my bag and left. Yesterday she showed up crying at my work when It happened so fast, you'd think it was a scene from a bad TV drama. One minute I was setting my keys on the counter, apologizing for forgetting to pick up the milk. Just milk, that's it. And the next, my mother's voice was slicing through the house like a siren. You're ungrateful! Get out of my house! She shrieked, her face flushed with a kind of fury I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. I just stood there stunned. For a second, my body moved on its own, muscle memory trained from years of trying to fix things, to smooth things over. I almost said I was sorry again. Almost. But then something inside me, something quiet and angry, snapped. I didn't scream back. I didn't plead. I didn't even pack properly. I just walked past her, grabbed my old duffel bag from the hall closet, stuffed it with whatever I could in 30 seconds, and stepped out into the night air. No words. No drama. Just done. As I pulled the doors shut behind me, her voice chased after me, still yelling things I didn't even hear. For the first time in my life, I didn't look back. The first few steps down the driveway were shaky. My hands trembled. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. But every step also felt lighter. Sadness, sure. A deep, gut-wrenching sadness. This was my mother. The woman who had raised me, clothed me, fought for me in the early years, before the anger crept into everything she touched. But there was something else rising up inside me too. A different feeling I hadn't expected. Freedom. The first night, I crashed on my friend Tyler's couch, the same old brown sectional he'd had since college, threadbare at the corners, smelling faintly of cheap pizza and laundry detergent. Tyler didn't ask questions. He just tossed me a blanket, handed me a beer, and said, "Whatever it is, man, you don't have to talk about it until you're ready." I appreciated that more than he probably realized. Lying there in the dark, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, the full weight of it all started sinking in. I wasn't going back. Not this time. I replayed everything, not just tonight, but all the years before it. The way she'd criticize the way I folded towels, the way she'd pick fights over dishes left in the sink for an hour. The way she would tell me, even half joking, "You'll never survive on your own. You're not built for the real world." I had chalked it up to stress. To her needing control after my dad left. To just how she was. But lying there on Tyler's couch, with the city lights flickering through the blinds, it hit me harder than anything else had that night. She never really saw me as an adult. Only as something to manage. Something to blame. The milk I forgot was just the spark. The kindling had been building for years. I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and thick, but it wasn't wild and explosive like hers. It was cold. It was tired. And it told me something simple and devastating. You don't owe her another apology. You owe yourself a life. By morning, my phone was a mess of missed calls and texts. Call me now. I didn't mean it like that. Come home and we'll talk. Fine. Be that way. See if I care. The back and forth of desperation and rage, like she couldn't decide whether to guilt me or punish me. I put the phone face down on the coffee table and left it there. Later that day, I opened my laptop and started looking for apartments. Nothing fancy, just a place to be mine. To shut a door without someone yelling behind it. I didn't even care about the chipped paint or the cracked linoleum floors some listings had. I just needed somewhere that I could sit, breathe, and not feel like a guest in my own life. That evening, while I was filling out a rental application at a cramped little coffee shop downtown, my phone buzzed again. A text this time. From my boss at the cafe where I worked part-time. "Hey man, your mom came by looking for you. Crying. Causing a scene. Just FYI. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting into a knot. Of course she did. Of course she couldn't let me leave quietly. Of course she needed to make it a spectacle. Part of me wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. But a bigger part, the one that had been growing stronger since the moment I grabbed that bag and walked out, knew exactly what I needed to do. I closed the laptop, took a long sip of my now cold coffee, and I started rehearsing the words I would say when I faced her again. Because next time, it wouldn't be her screaming and me apologizing. Next time, it would be me standing firm, and making sure she understood that this time, the door had swung shut for good. The next morning at the cafe, I showed up early. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew she'd come back. My job wasn't glamorous. I worked the morning shift at Maple and Main, a little independent coffee shop squeezed between an old bookstore and a shoe repair place nobody ever went into. It smelled like fresh bread and roasted espresso beans, and the walls were lined with framed photos of the owner's vacations to places like Tuscany and Marrakesh. It was the kind of place where regulars knew you by name, where you memorized the orders of the older man who always got a small black coffee and sat by the window scribbling in a notebook. I loved it there. It was peaceful, or at least it had been. Until that day. I was wiping down the counter when I heard the front door jingle open. I didn't even have to look up. I felt her before I saw her. My mother. Still wearing her work uniform, hair messy, eyes puffy, like she'd been crying all morning. She scanned the cafe wildly, ignoring the handful of customers sipping lattes and typing on laptops, and made a beeline straight for me. "Daniel!" she cried loud enough that half the cafe turned their heads. I froze for just a second. Everyone, my coworkers, the regulars, even the quiet old man by the window, was staring at me now. But when I finally looked up, I didn't feel fear. I didn't even feel embarrassment. I felt cold. Solid. Like steel running through my spine. She rushed behind the counter, crossing the line between customer and staff, and grabbed my wrist. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Come home. We can fix this." I gently but firmly pulled my arm away. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice calm but clear. "You kicked me out. Remember?" Her face crumpled. "I was angry. I didn't mean it. You screamed at me to leave. You told me I was ungrateful." I could feel the eyes of the customers burning into my back, into hers. "I didn't care. Let them hear. Let them see. I honored your wishes," I said. She shook her head frantically, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You're my son. I didn't mean it. You can't just walk away." I felt something twist inside me, an old instinct. The part of me that wanted to fix things. To reach out. To say something that would make it all okay. But then I remembered every moment I'd swallowed my pride to make peace. Every time I apologized just to keep her calm. Every time I shrank myself to survive her anger. And I knew, no matter how badly she cried, no matter how much she begged, I wasn't that boy anymore. I took a breath and spoke louder, steady enough that everyone could hear. "You don't get to treat people like garbage and then cry when they leave." Her mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water, as if she physically couldn't process hearing that in public. "You told me to go," I said, voice strong. "So I did. And now I'm gone." The room was dead silent. Even the espresso machine stopped hissing, as if it was listening too. My manager, Sam, who'd been watching from the back, finally stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said, polite but firm. Still she stayed there, rooted to the spot like if she just stood there long enough, the past would undo itself. But it wouldn't. It was over. I was done. Without another word, she turned and stumbled out the door, her sobs echoing faintly as she disappeared down the sidewalk. I stood there for a long minute, heart pounding, breathing slow, as the adrenaline drained from my system. Sam clapped a hand gently on my shoulder. "You good, man?" he asked. I nodded. Better than I'd been in a long time. And somehow, standing there behind that counter, I felt taller than I ever had under my mother's roof. I wasn't just Daniel who lived at home anymore. I was Daniel, free, standing, unbroken. The cafe felt quieter after she left, like the room itself had let out a breath it didn't realize it was holding. I wiped my hands on my apron, feeling the way you do after a storm has passed. Everything was calmer now, but part of me was still waiting for the next flash of lightning. It didn't come. Instead, I finished my shift like nothing had happened. Served lattes, wiped down tables, rang up orders with a steady hand. And when my shift ended, I didn't rush out the back door, afraid she might be waiting. I walked out the front, head up, chest open to the afternoon sun. I called Tyler on the way to the bus stop. "You still cool with me crashing a few more nights?" I asked. "Bro," he laughed. "You can stay as long as you need. Rent's cheap, 1 6-pack of beer a week." "Deal," I said, smiling for real for the first time in what felt like weeks. But staying on Tyler's couch wasn't the plan. Not for long. The next morning, I started touring apartments. Nothing fancy, no Instagrammable lofts or high-rise condos. Just cheap studios where the walls were thin and the carpet smelled faintly like the ghost of tenants past. But every creaky floorboard, every chipped counter felt like a badge of freedom. No more walking on eggshells. No more feeling like a mistake just waiting to happen. I found a place by the end of the week. Small. Old. Slightly crooked. But it had a window that caught the afternoon light just right, and a tiny kitchen where I could imagine brewing coffee that didn't come with a side of criticism. The landlord, a wiry old guy named Mr. Hargrove, handed me the keys without much ceremony. "Welcome home," he said, and the words almost made me choke up. Not because the apartment was perfect, but because it was mine. The nights were still the hardest. After work, after furniture shopping on a budget of whatever cash I could scrounge, after hanging curtains that didn't match, I would sit on the bare mattress in the middle of the room and stare at the ceiling. That was when the voices came back. The memories. My mother's voice, telling me I wouldn't survive without her. Telling me the world was cruel and cold and unkind, and that she was the only one who would ever put up with me. I almost believed it, some nights. Almost. But then I'd look around, at the empty walls, the mismatched curtains, the tiny fridge humming in the corner, and remember. She didn't throw me out into nothing. She threw me out into my own life. And I was finally living it. The text kept coming at first. Apologies tangled up with blame. Promises knotted around guilt trips. But I didn't answer. The silence wasn't revenge. It wasn't even anger, really. It was self-respect, something I was learning to protect the way you protect a house that you built with your own hands. No more begging for love from people who used it like a weapon. No more handing over my peace like a kid trading lunch money to avoid a beating. I wasn't mad anymore. I was free. And freedom, I realized, was never loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was buying a second-hand couch without asking for anyone's permission. It was drinking coffee in the morning without worrying who would find something wrong with it. It was lying down at night, hearing only my own breathing, and knowing that no one could scream it away. It was 2 weeks before I saw her again. I was walking back from the corner store, arms full of groceries I could barely afford, when I spotted her across the street, standing by her car, pretending to fiddle with something under the hood. It was obvious she had been waiting for me. For a second, I thought about crossing over. Maybe even hearing her out. Old habits die hard. But then I caught the look on her face. Not regret. Not even sadness. Just desperation, the kind that wasn't about me, but about her. About fixing her comfort, not our relationship. I tightened my grip on the grocery bags and kept walking. Didn't speed up. Didn't slow down. Just kept my eyes forward, one step after another. She called my name once, soft, almost hopeful. I didn't turn around. I heard the car door slam behind me, the engine coughing to life, and then the slow pull of her car disappearing down the block. That was it. No screaming. No final argument. No tearful goodbye. Just distance. And honestly, that was all I needed. The days slipped into a kind of rhythm after that. Work in the mornings. Apartment hunting on weekends, even though I already had a place, just dreaming bigger now. Nights spent on the mattress with a second-hand lamp beside it, reading books I'd always meant to start but never had time for. There was an odd peace in the simplicity. No tiptoeing around moods. No deciphering silences. Just me. and the life I was piecing together from scratch. I started doing little things I'd always wanted to try. Cooking meals that weren't microwaved. Learning how to fix a leaky faucet without getting yelled at for doing it wrong. Buying a second-hand guitar from a pawn shop, even though I could barely strum 3 chords. Every tiny act felt like defiance. Every small decision was a brick laid in the foundation of the person I was finally becoming, not the scared kid they had kept trying to mold, but someone real, someone rough-edged and standing on his own. Sometimes, late at night, the grief would creep in, quiet and raw. Not grief for her, exactly. But for the mother I had always hoped she could be. The one who might have said I'm proud of you instead of you're not enough. I mourned that mother. Not the one who screamed me out the door. And I let that be okay. It happened on a Tuesday. I was closing up the cafe, stacking chairs on tables, when my phone buzzed on the counter. A name flashed across the screen, Aunt Carol. I hadn't heard from her in months, not since the last big family blowout I hadn't been invited to. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, weighing whether I even wanted to pick up. But something inside me, not obligation, but curiosity, made me swipe to answer. "Hey, Danny," she said, her voice soft. "Just wanted to see how you're doing." It caught me off guard, that simple kindness. No accusations. No guilt trips. "I'm good," I said, and for once, it wasn't a lie. There was a pause, then she said, "Your mom told everyone you ran away. Said you were having some issues." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "Of course she did. I'm sorry," Aunt Carol said. "I know how she can be." Another pause, longer this time, then she added, "If you ever need anything, I'm here." It wasn't a grand gesture. It didn't fix everything. But it was enough. "Thanks," I said. "Really." After we hung up, I sat in the empty cafe for a while, the hum of the fridges filling the silence. I thought about how, a year ago, a call like that would have wrecked me, sent me running back to a house that never really felt like home. But now, it just felt like a door I didn't have to walk through if I didn't want to. I was building something new. Something better. And I was doing it for me. That night after Aunt Carol's call, I sat on the tiny balcony outside my apartment, just me, the hum of the city, and a cracked plastic chair I found by a dumpster and claimed as my throne. It was colder than it looked. I wrapped my hoodie tighter around me, staring up at the washed-out stars hidden behind streetlights and smog. I thought about my mother. About the life I'd left behind. Some nights, the loneliness hit sharper than I cared to admit. It wasn't just the absence of her, it was the absence of a home I had always tried to build in a place that didn't want me. I had tried so hard to earn something that should have been unconditional. Tried to patch holes in walls I didn't break. Tried to fill silences that were never mine to fix. And for a long time, I believed the problem was me. But sitting there, watching the city breathe around me, I realized something important. You can't make someone love you the right way by loving them harder. You can't beg someone to be proud of you and expect it to feel real. You can't stay in a house that burns you and call it shelter. I hadn't just walked away from my mother that night. I had walked away from the version of myself that believed he wasn't enough on his own. It didn't make the sadness disappear. There were still days when I wished things could have been different. Still mornings when I woke up half expecting a text that said I'm sorry, one that never came. But little by little, those wishes stopped feeling like needs. They were just memories. And memories, I was learning, couldn't build a future. Only I could do that. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. Breath by breath. One evening, a few weeks later, I found myself pulling out an old notebook from the bottom of a moving box. I hadn't unpacked most of my things yet. The place still looked half abandoned, but something about that night felt different. I needed to get the weight out of my chest. So I sat at the kitchen counter under the buzzing fluorescent light and started to write. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. Dear Mom. I hesitated, the pen hovering above the page. Where did you even start when years of hurt had piled up like junk in a storage unit nobody ever cleaned out? I thought about writing the obvious. You hurt me. You pushed me out. You never listened. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized I didn't want this letter to be a list of accusations. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even looking for closure from her. I was writing this for me. So I wrote. I spent a lot of years thinking if I just worked harder, if I just loved you better, you'd see me differently. But it was never about how much I gave. It was about how little you were willing to receive. I wrote about the childhood dinners eaten in silence. About the cold shoulders when I needed comfort. About the way small mistakes were treated like character flaws. I'm not angry anymore, I wrote. I'm just tired. Tired of chasing a version of you that never existed outside my own hope. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't rage. I just told the truth. I love you. But I love myself enough now to let go. When I finally put the pen down, my hand was cramped and the room felt heavy with everything I had poured onto those pages. I didn't fold it. I didn't seal it. I didn't even think about mailing it. I just tucked it back into the notebook, slid it onto a shelf, and left it there. Not as a message for her, but as a monument for me. Proof that I had survived loving someone who could not love me the way I needed. Proof that I had left, stayed gone, and built a life anyway.